In the centuries following the death of Socrates, a new kind of philosophy emerged, one that would not seek abstract ideals in the heavens, but practical strength for life on earth. In the early 3rd century BCE, Athens was no longer at the peak of its classical glory, but it remained the intellectual capital of the Greek world. Amid the decline of the great schools founded by Plato and Aristotle, a quiet figure began teaching in the public colonnades of the Athenian agora. His name was Zeno of Citium. A merchant by birth and a shipwreck survivor by fate, Zeno did not enter philosophy through elite academies. He arrived in Athens by accident and stayed to found one of the most enduring schools of thought in Western history, Stoicism. Stoicism would become the guiding philosophy for Roman emperors, military generals, early Christian thinkers, and modern leaders alike. But its origins were modest. Zeno taught in the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch, a public space open to anyone willing to listen. His system emphasized logic, natural law, and the development of inner character, above wealth, fame, or pleasure. In this documentary, we follow the life of Zeno of Citium, from his Phoenician roots in Cyprus, to the fateful shipwreck that brought him to Athens, to the founding of Stoicism and the rise of his philosophical successors. Through historical evidence, recorded accounts, and the legacy he left behind, we will trace the path of a man who never sought recognition, but became the architect of a philosophy that still speaks to the human condition today. This is the true story of Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism, architect of inner resilience, teacher of a world in crisis. Around the year 312 BCE, Zeno of Citium, then in his early 20s, embarked on a commercial voyage across the eastern Mediterranean. As the son of a merchant family in Citium, a city with strong Phoenician and Hellenic influence, he was likely engaged in trade involving dyes, metals, or textiles, typical of Cyprus's exports. During this voyage, disaster struck. Ancient sources, including Diogenes Laertius, recount that Zeno's ship was wrecked and he lost his entire cargo at sea. While the details of the shipwreck remain unclear, the outcome was pivotal. Zeno arrived in Athens with no wealth, no resources, and no immediate prospects. This event, whether literal or partly embellished over time, marked a defining turning point in Zeno's life. Stranded in a foreign city, he sought refuge not in commerce, but in learning. According to tradition, Zeno wandered into an Athenian bookshop and began reading about Socrates. Inspired by what he read, he asked the bookseller where he could meet a man like the one in the story. The bookseller pointed to Crates of Thebes, a well-known philosopher and follower of the Cynic school. This moment began Zeno's transition from merchant to student of philosophy. Modern historians generally treat the shipwreck as a symbolic story, a narrative device used by later biographers to illustrate a life-changing moment. Regardless of its literal truth, what is clear is that sometime between 314 and 310 BCE, Zeno arrived in Athens and abandoned commerce in favor of philosophy. The Athens of this period was a city recovering from war and political turmoil. The once dominant academy and lyceum still operated, but philosophical life had diversified. In this intellectually fertile environment, Zeno would spend the next 2 decades studying with multiple schools, beginning with the most austere, the Cynics. What began as a personal loss would become the catalyst for one of the most enduring philosophical systems in Western history. Following his arrival in Athens around 312 BCE, Zeno of Citium began a long and disciplined process of philosophical training. His earliest known teacher was Crates of Thebes, a direct disciple of Diogenes of Sinope, and one of the leading figures of the Cynic school at the time. The Cynics were known for their radical rejection of social convention, material wealth, and political status. They promoted a life in accordance with nature, guided by virtue and complete independence from worldly needs. Their practice was ascetic, provocative, and often confrontational, conducted in the streets and public squares, not formal schools. Under Crates, Zeno was immersed in a philosophy of hardship and self-restraint. According to ancient biographers, Crates encouraged Zeno to shed all attachments, material and emotional, in pursuit of moral freedom. Diogenes Laertius recounts that Crates once gave Zeno a jar full of lentil soup and told him to carry it through the city. When Zeno tried to hide the jar in his cloak out of embarrassment, Crates smashed it open, forcing Zeno to endure the public spectacle as part of his philosophical training. These anecdotes, while difficult to verify, illustrate the pedagogical methods of the Cynics at the time, teaching not through theory, but through public action and moral resilience. Zeno studied under Crates for several years, reportedly adopting a minimalist lifestyle and gaining a reputation for discipline and quiet focus. Zeno did not remain exclusively within the Cynic school. Between c. 308 and 300 BCE, he studied with several other philosophical groups. The Megarics, followers of Euclides of Megara, from whom he learned logic and dialectical reasoning. The Academics, descendants of Plato, where he encountered metaphysical structures and ethical dialogues. Possibly the Peripatetics, successors of Aristotle, from whom he may have gained a respect for natural observation and classification. These years of intellectual exposure helped Zeno integrate moral discipline from the Cynics with structured logic and cosmology from the other schools. By the end of the decade, around 300 BCE, Zeno had completed what was, effectively, his philosophical apprenticeship. He had developed a unique synthesis of ideas: ethical rigor without Cynic extremism, logical clarity without academic abstraction, naturalism without myth. Zeno was no longer a student. He was preparing to teach and to found a school of his own. By the year 300 BCE, after nearly a decade of intense philosophical training, Zeno of Citium was ready to begin teaching independently. Rather than establish a private academy, he chose to teach in a public space, a symbolic and practical choice that reflected the accessible nature of his emerging philosophy. Zeno's lectures were held at the Stoa Poikile, Greek Stoa Pikili, meaning painted porch. It was a covered colonnade located on the northern side of the Athenian Agora, one of the busiest areas of the city. The structure was adorned with murals depicting heroic Greek battles and mythological scenes, including the Battle of Marathon. Unlike Plato's Academy or Aristotle's Lyceum, both of which were semi-private institutions, the Stoa was a fully public venue, open to merchants, citizens, travelers, and common laborers alike. Zeno's choice to teach in this space was deliberate. His goal was not to isolate philosophy within elite circles, but to bring it directly to the people, especially those living in a rapidly changing, uncertain post-Alexandrian world. Zeno's followers began to refer to themselves as Stoikoi, meaning those of the Stoa. Over time, the term gave rise to the formal name of the philosophical movement, Stoicism. Zeno's school quickly developed a strong reputation for moral seriousness, intellectual clarity, and ethical focus. His own character, modest, reserved, and principled, helped distinguish Stoicism from other schools. Unlike the flamboyant provocations of the Cynics or the abstract metaphysics of the Platonists, Zeno's lectures emphasized reasoned action, self-control, and living in accordance with nature. Like other philosophical schools of the era, Zeno structured Stoic teaching around three primary disciplines: logic, the study of reasoning and valid argument; physics, the study of nature and the cosmos, including theology, ethics; the application of virtue and rational living in daily life. While later Stoics would refine each of these branches, Zeno established the foundational framework that connected them. Logic was the tool to understand the world. Physics explained the natural order. Ethics was the goal, to live a virtuous life aligned with that order. During this early period, Zeno attracted a loyal group of students, several of whom would go on to lead the Stoic school after his death. Among them were Aristo of Chios, who emphasized ethics over logic and physics, Cleanthes, a former boxer who became Zeno's immediate successor, Chrysippus, who would later systematize Stoic doctrine and expand its influence throughout the Hellenistic world. Though Stoicism remained a relatively modest school in Zeno's lifetime, it earned a reputation for discipline, self-sufficiency, and consistency of character. Zeno's lectures at the Stoa Poikile would continue for over 3 decades, establishing him as one of the most respected philosophers in Athens, despite being a foreigner by birth. Zeno of Citium is recognized not only as the founder of the Stoic school, but also as the architect of one of the most systematic philosophical frameworks of the ancient world. Drawing from the traditions of Socratic ethics, Cynic asceticism, and Megarian logic, Zeno constructed a comprehensive doctrine that would shape Greco-Roman intellectual life for centuries. Zeno's teachings were organized into 3 interconnected branches, a structure that later Stoics would refine and adopt as standard. Logic, physics, physici, ethics, ethiki. Zeno often compared philosophy to a living organism. Logic was the bones and sinews, the structure and framework. Physics was the flesh, explaining how the world works. Ethics was the soul, the final goal and purpose of life. Zeno's logical system was influenced by the Megarics, known for their rigorous use of dialectical reasoning and propositional logic. Zeno and his followers developed early concepts of propositional logic, analyzing how propositions, statements, relate to one another in argument form. These efforts predated and anticipated many ideas in formal logic used centuries later. The Stoics emphasized clarity of thought, distinguishing true impressions from false ones, and warned against being ruled by emotions or external appearances. Logic, for Zeno, was not merely academic. It was essential for making sound moral judgments. In Stoic philosophy, physics refers not only to natural science, but also to theological and metaphysical speculation about the universe. Zeno taught that the cosmos is a living, rational entity, pervaded by a divine ordering principle known as the logos. Everything in nature, including human beings, was understood to be governed by this logos, an eternal and rational law of order. Zeno rejected Plato's concept of transcendent forms and emphasized that reality is material, including the soul and even God, which he considered to be a kind of fiery breath, pneuma, infused in the cosmos. The Stoic view of nature led to a deterministic cosmology. All events are part of a rational causal chain. What may seem like misfortune is, in fact, a part of nature's greater purpose, even if humans cannot immediately understand it. Ethics was the central concern of Zeno's teachings. He taught that the goal of life is to live in accordance with nature, both human nature as rational beings and universal nature as part of the larger cosmos. According to Zeno, the only true good is virtue, and the only true evil is vice. Everything else, wealth, health, reputation, pleasure, pain, is indifferent. These things may be preferred or avoided, but they do not determine a person's moral worth. Zeno identified 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, practical knowledge of good and evil; courage, strength in the face of pain or fear; justice, fairness and respect in social conduct; temperance, moderation and self-restraint. Happiness, or eudaimonia, was the product of a virtuous life, not external success or emotional gratification. This ethical vision emphasized moral autonomy, emotional discipline, and rational behavior in all aspects of life. Zeno's teachings laid the intellectual groundwork for a moral system that could be applied across different cultures, social classes, and even belief systems. His emphasis on self-control, logical consistency, and resilience in the face of adversity would appeal to later Roman statesmen, soldiers, and philosophers. Although many of Zeno's original writings, including his works Republic on Nature and Ethics, have been lost, his ideas survive through the works of his successors and in later commentaries. By the final decades of the 3rd century BCE, Zeno of Citium had firmly established his philosophical presence in Athens. His reputation for personal discipline, moral seriousness, and clarity of thought attracted not only a wide range of students, but also the respect of rival schools. Zeno remained the head of the Stoic school for over 30 years, teaching daily at the Stoa Poikile. As his influence grew, so did the need to preserve and transmit his system. After Zeno's retirement and eventual death, leadership of the Stoic school passed to one of his closest disciples, Cleanthes of Assos, a former boxer and water carrier who had studied under Zeno for nearly 2 decades. Cleanthes was noted for his extraordinary endurance and loyalty. Though not as intellectually dynamic as his teacher or his successor, he played a crucial role in preserving Zeno's writings and maintaining the school's stability. He also contributed to Stoic theology and cosmology. His most famous surviving work is the Hymn to Zeus, a poetic celebration of the divine rational order, logos, that governs the cosmos, a central concept in Stoic physics. Cleanthes emphasized piety, devotion to nature, and the acceptance of fate, reinforcing many of Zeno's original principles. After Cleanthes, the school was inherited by its most prolific and influential figure, Chrysippus of Soli, often regarded as the co-founder of Stoicism alongside Zeno. A brilliant logician and writer, Chrysippus is said to have written over 700 books, although only fragments remain today. He expanded and systematized every area of Stoic thought. He formalized Stoic logic, creating a sophisticated system of propositional inference. He defended Stoic determinism and the notion of moral responsibility. He elaborated Zeno's teachings on ethics, adding detail to the distinction between preferred indifference and true goods. He provided responses to academic skepticism, strengthening Stoicism's intellectual defenses. Chrysippus is credited with making Stoicism a comprehensive and coherent school of philosophy, capable of rivaling the Academy, Plato, and the Lyceum, Aristotle. According to Diogenes Laertius, later Stoics would say, if there had been no Chrysippus, there would have been no Stoa. Under the leadership of Cleanthes, and especially Chrysippus, Stoicism transitioned from a small circle around Zeno into a fully recognized philosophical school. By the late 3rd century BCE, Stoicism was one of the 4 major schools of thought in Athens, alongside the Academy, Platonism, Lyceum, Aristotelianism, Garden, Epicureanism. Stoic teaching began to spread across the Hellenistic world, reaching cities like Rhodes, Alexandria, and eventually Rome. While Zeno himself did not leave a vast body of surviving texts, his successors ensured that his philosophical system endured, adapted, debated, and applied across generations. In his lifetime and beyond, Zeno was admired for his austerity, honesty, and discipline. The Athenians reportedly awarded him honorary citizenship, and a bronze statue was erected in his honor in the city. According to ancient accounts, Zeno died in his early 70s after sustaining a minor injury. When he tripped and broke his toe, he reportedly quoted a line from a tragic poet, then voluntarily stopped eating, believing that the time of his natural end had arrived, a decision consistent with his Stoic principles. His quiet departure marked the end of a life lived in full accordance with the values he taught. Following the death of Zeno of Citium and the succession of Cleanthes and Chrysippus, Stoicism continued to develop throughout the Hellenistic period. But its most profound cultural and historical impact came centuries later, when the philosophy crossed into the heart of the Roman Republic. and eventually, the Roman Empire. While Zeno's own writings were mostly lost, his core ideas were preserved and transmitted through a lineage of teachers and scholars. As the political and cultural center of the ancient world shifted from Greece to Rome, so too did Stoicism. Transition from Greek to Roman Stoicism. By the 2nd century BCE, Stoicism had reached the Roman world through Greek-speaking philosophers who traveled to Rome and taught the ruling elite. One of the most notable figures in this transmission was Panaetius of Rhodes, c. 185 to 110 BCE, who softened some of the more austere aspects of Stoicism to make it more compatible with Roman values. He emphasized civic duty, social ethics, and personal responsibility, ideas that resonated with the Roman aristocracy. His student, Posidonius, continued this work by integrating Stoic doctrine with elements of history, geography, and even astrology. These adaptations helped Stoicism become not only a personal philosophy, but a practical guide for political and public life. Roman Stoicism and key figures. By the 1st century CE, Stoicism had become a major intellectual force in the Roman Empire, embraced by senators, generals, and emperors alike. 3 major Roman Stoics stand out. 1. Lucius Annaeus Seneca, c. 4 BCE to 5 CE. A statesman, playwright, and advisor to Emperor Nero, Seneca used Stoic principles to reflect on power, fate, and the moral obligations of the elite. His letters and essays, such as On the Shortness of Life, remain widely read today. 2. Epictetus, c. 55 135 CE. Born into slavery, Epictetus studied Stoicism after gaining his freedom. He emphasized personal responsibility, control of inner life, and moral resilience. His teachings were preserved by his student Arrian in the Discourses and the Enchiridion. 3. Marcus Aurelius, 121 180 CE. As Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius brought Stoicism to its historical peak. His private journal, now known as Meditations, applied Stoic principles to the challenges of leadership, warfare, and aging. He is often regarded as the embodiment of a philosopher king, deeply influenced by Zeno's original doctrines. While Stoicism evolved over time, the core ideas laid down by Zeno remained intact. Virtue is the only true good. Live in accordance with nature. Accept what is beyond your control. Cultivate reason, discipline, and inner peace. These principles provided a moral compass for individuals navigating the uncertainty of imperial politics, military campaigns, and personal tragedy. Unlike other ancient philosophies that faded with time, Stoicism proved adaptable, durable, and practical, applicable to emperors, slaves, soldiers, and scholars alike. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Stoicism declined as Christianity became dominant in Europe. However, its influence was preserved in early Christian moral teachings, and Stoic concepts would later resurface during the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and in modern psychology. Today, Stoicism is studied not only as a school of ancient philosophy, but as a framework for personal development, influencing areas like cognitive behavioral therapy, leadership training, and resilience coaching. At the foundation of this vast influence stands Zeno of Citium, a man who began as a shipwrecked merchant and became the intellectual father of an empire-spanning tradition. By the final years of his life, Zeno of Citium had become one of the most respected philosophers in Athens. Though not a native Athenian, he had earned the admiration of citizens, scholars, and political leaders alike. He had lived a life of discipline, humility, and consistency, traits that defined both his teachings and personal conduct. His philosophical school, founded at the Stoa Poikile, had grown into a permanent fixture of intellectual life in the city. Zeno continued to teach well into old age, maintaining his routine of public instruction and private contemplation. Ancient sources suggest that Zeno died around the age of 72 in approximately 262 BCE. The account of his death is preserved by Diogenes Laertius, who writes that Zeno suffered a minor accident, breaking his toe after tripping. Interpreting the injury as a sign that it was time to depart from life, Zeno reportedly uttered a line from a tragic poet. "I come of my own accord, why call me thus?" According to tradition, he then voluntarily ceased eating, a practice not uncommon among ancient philosophers who believed in dying with dignity when life no longer served its natural course. While this account may contain elements of embellishment, it reflects the Stoic ideal of facing death with calm acceptance, reasoned judgment, and inner control, principles that Zeno had lived by for decades. Zeno's influence was not confined to his school. Despite being a foreigner, he was honored with Athenian citizenship, a rare distinction at the time. The city also commissioned a bronze statue in his likeness, placed in the public square. An inscription commemorated him not as a conqueror or lawgiver, but as a man who had taught virtue and self-control to others. His legacy was one of quiet leadership, grounded not in force or fame, but in moral example. Classical biographers consistently portray Zeno as temperate in lifestyle, unpretentious in speech and dress, uncompromising in moral integrity. He was said to be approachable, thoughtful, and deeply committed to philosophy as a guide for real life. Unlike other philosophers who sought theoretical elegance, Zeno valued practical application. His legacy was secured not through volume of writing, most of which is now lost, but through the structure he built and the generations of thinkers he inspired. Zeno of Citium may not have achieved the fame of Plato or Aristotle, but his contributions were no less foundational. He created a philosophical system that emphasized reason, resilience, and virtue, offered guidance for both private character and public duty, influenced generations of thinkers, from Hellenistic scholars to Roman emperors, from a shipwrecked merchant to the founder of one of the most enduring schools in human thought. Zeno's life illustrates the Stoic belief that true greatness lies not in fortune, but in how we choose to live, with discipline, clarity, and purpose. More than 2,000 years later, the ideas he set in motion continue to help people navigate adversity, find meaning, and pursue lives of integrity. We sincerely thank you for spending your valuable time with us today, as we explored the life and legacy of Zeno of Citium, a philosopher whose teachings on virtue, reason, and resilience continue to resonate across centuries. If you found this program meaningful, we kindly invite you to subscribe to our channel and consider sharing this video with others who appreciate thoughtful history. Your presence and support are truly appreciated. We look forward to welcoming you again in future episodes. With warm regards. Thank you, and take good care.